A major Chinese military presence in the South Pacific flagged in a draft security deal between China and the Solomon Islands would represent a red line for Australia, a security expert has warned. Jonathan Pleck, of the Lowy Institute think tank in Sydney, told 9.au any deal between Honiara and Beijing that enabled Chinese warships to be based in the region would be a major shift in the balance of power. That would be a red line for Australia in the Pacific, and it would be a phenomenal change in the way we see our national security, Dr. Pleck said. Leaked document reveals Chinese military plans with Aussie neighbour. Under a leaked draft security deal, the Solomon Islands could allow Chinese naval ships to dock in the country and protect the safety of Chinese citizens and major projects. He was speaking after a leaked document revealed the Solomon Islands is in discussions with China to allow the superpower's military forces to be stationed in the Pacific nation, less than 2,000 kilometres from Australia's coastline. Dr. Pleck cautioned that it was only a draft agreement and Australia should not overreact to it, but its leaking exposed Beijing's true ambitions. It can be seen as a gift for Canberra. This reveals China's goals in black and white, he said. Dr. Pleck stressed the Solomon Islands would retain the final say over any stationing of Chinese military forces in the Pacific nation. The draft security cooperation agreement, which the Australian government has acknowledged, was shared on social media yesterday and proposes giving China the right to use its forces to protect the safety of Chinese personnel and major projects in Solomon Islands. It would also allow Chinese ships to visit and make stopovers on the archipelago, which sits about 1,700 kilometres off the coast of Queensland. Solomon Islands may, according to its own needs, request China to send police, armed police, military personnel, and other law enforcement and armed forces to Solomon Islands to assist in maintaining social order, protecting people's lives and property, providing humanitarian assistance, carrying out disaster response, or providing assistance on other tasks agreed upon by the parties, the draft document states. Australia said it would be concerned by any move from China to establish a military base in the South Pacific. That would potentially put Chinese forces within striking distance at a time when tensions over trade, diplomacy, and China's increasing militarization of islands in the South China Sea have been increasing. It would also present a shift in the Solomon Islands security arrangements. Australia sent federal police officers to the country to help quell violent unrest in the capital of Honiara last November. News of the draft security agreement triggered a political row in Australia today, with Labor accusing the federal government of being asleep at the wheel. Biden declares NATO will act if Russia uses chemical weapons. Australian Federal Police and Australian Defence Force members were deployed to the Solomon Islands last year during major rioting. Labor frontbencher Bill Shorten told Today this: the Morrison government had made blundered in letting China step into Australia's backyard and traditional area of influence. This is significant. The Morrison government has been asleep at the wheel, Mr. Shorten said. I think this is a major foreign policy blunder, and that when we've got these sort of agreements being signed in our backyard. But Defence Minister Peter Dutton insisted the government had not made an error. We would be concerned clearly about any military base being established, and we would express that to the Solomon Islands government, he said. Mr. Dutton insisted China had not stepped in as a consequence of Australia reducing its foreign aid budget. We have a fantastic relationship with the Solomon Islands, there's a lot more we can do for them, he said. He also urged Pacific nations to be wary about China increasing its footprint in the region. I don't think it's consistent with the values that we share with the Solomon Islands and with Tonga and other countries, Mr. Dutton said.